Hey everyone, welcome to this explainer. If you're a software dev who's been hearing all the buzz about AI agents but hasn't really dug in yet, you are in the exact right place. Today, we're taking a deep dive into the actual nuts and bolts of an AI agent. Specifically, we're looking at how Claude Code operates directly within your terminal. We're going to strip away the magic and really look at the functional architecture that makes this entirely different from the chatbots you're probably used to.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here's our structural roadmap for today. We'll start with Section 1, Beyond the Chat Window. Then Section 2, Inside the Agentic Loop. Section 3 is Compacting Conversation History. Section 4, Toggling Permission Modes. And finally, Section 5, Safe Shell Command Practices. Let's get right to it.
All right, Section 1, Beyond the Chat Window, a paradigm shift.
So, for those of us accustomed to standard dev tools, we really need to set up a massive paradigm shift here. This is the fundamental question we've got to ask. What actually happens when AI leaves that isolated little chat window and enters your terminal? Up until now, our mental model of an AI assistant has been pretty stateless and completely passive, right? You ask a question, it spits out an answer, and it just sits there doing nothing until you ask again. But injecting an agent directly into your terminal, that changes the dynamic entirely.
Think about the contrast between these two models for a second. Standard AI chat is literally just text in, text out. There's absolutely nothing in between. But a Claude Code agent, it does so much more. It actively reads your code base, it figures out on its own when to execute code, it takes tangible action, and, this is the real game changer, it verifies its own work. It's actively interacting with your environment to actually get closer to finishing a task, rather than just, talking to you about the task.
So to bridge that gap between just taking in text and taking actual action, the agent relies on tools. Tools are the absolute backbone of how these agents work. The agent uses semantic searching to intelligently figure out when it needs to call these tools, like a read file tool or a search web tool. It's this semantic search that acts as the critical bridge, allowing the agent to fetch a tool's output and actually use it to push your task forward.
Moving on to Section 2, Inside the Agentic Loop, Core Mechanics.
As developers, we love a good systems thinking approach, right? So Claude Code is best explained through this agentic loop. Think of it almost like a REPL, a read, evaluate, print loop, but for AI. Step 1, you enter a prompt. Step 2, Claude Code hits the model to gather the required context, which returns text or a tool call it can execute. Step 3, it takes action, like editing a file or running a bash command. And Step 4, it verifies those results. Did it actually achieve what your prompt asked for? If yes, Claude finishes and waits. If no, the loop just runs again and again until the results are completely achieved and verifiable.
Now, you might be wondering, wait, do I just lose control while this loop is spinning? Absolutely not. You are never locked out during execution. Throughout this entire loop, you retain the power to jump in, add context, interrupt the process, or steer the model to help guide it toward your end goal. You are always in the driver's seat.
All right, Section 3, Compacting Conversation History Memory Management.
Now, what's really interesting here is how the agent handles its own memory. As this loop runs, generating commands, reading files, spitting out text, we have to talk about context window limits. Claude has a context window that dictates how much of your conversation, file content, and command outputs it can actually store. Once you hit that limit, it triggers this brilliant thing called context compaction. This is a totally automatic process that determines what can be taken out of the context window or what can be summarized to bring the total size back down.
You can essentially think of this compaction as automated garbage collection for your AI agent. By dropping or summarizing older or less relevant data to optimize the context, the agent makes sure it doesn't just crash or halt when the history reaches its absolute limit. It just keeps the loop running smoothly.
Next up, Section 4, Toggling Permission Modes, Tactical Execution.
Okay, let's talk control. Claude Code gives you highly configurable permissions directly in the terminal so you decide what the agent is actually allowed to touch. Default behavior means the agent has to ask your explicit permission before it edits a file or runs a shell command. Then you've got auto accept, which is this really cool hybrid approach between automation and safety. It'll go ahead and edit files without asking you, but it'll still stop and ask for permission before running any terminal commands. And finally, there's plan mode. This restricts the agent to using read-only tools to safely compile a plan of action before anything actually starts.
And hey, here is a highly practical, actionable tip for your terminal workflow. You can just use Shift plus Tab on your keyboard to instantly toggle between these different permission modes on the fly. It's a simple shortcut for sure, but it gives you incredibly fluid control over the agent's autonomy.
Which brings us to Section 5, Safe Shell Command Practices,
terminal safety.
We definitely need to talk about the inherent dangers of giving an AI autonomy in your terminal. So, the crucial point is balancing that autonomy with safety. The source material explicitly warns that it is really worth being cautious when skipping permissions. Think about it. If you give Claude Code Complete free rein to run commands without your oversight, a mistake executes instantly. Unchecked commands mean an error could be introduced or a destructive command could be run, making it way harder to catch a bug before it even happens. Just always be mindful of the permissions you grant.
By combining an agentic loop, a automatically managed context window, powerful tools, and those configurable permissions, Claude Code is just fundamentally different from a standard chat window. It reads, it acts, and it verifies. So I want to leave you with this provocative thought. If your terminal can now iterate and verify its own work automatically, what are you going to build with all the time you save? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and happy building!